Previously on Higurashi when they cry Kai Chapter 8.
それはお気の毒でしたね。
いや、本当に笑い事ではないですよ。ダム計画はどうなってるんですか？本当にこの村はダム湖に沈められてしまうんですか？
それについては東京の方でも圧力をかけています。表向きは騒ぎになっていますが、実際の裏方ではかなり屋台骨がぐらついているはずです。
その圧力が早く効くといいんですがね。村は朝から晩まで賑やかで、村人の心もこのところすさんできたように思います。
I'm just a doctor and a researcher. Without Takano-san's support, it would be impossible for me to manage this institution. She's a pipeline to her clients in Tokyo, my assistant, as well as a researcher who is an expert on Hinamizawa Syndrome. Her existence is absolutely necessary here. The more I think about it, the more I feel this should have been the Takano Institute rather than the Irie Institute, and she should have been the director. But that was explained to me when they had asked me to take this position. My client wanted a civilian to manage this place.
おかしななんてことはないよ。高野さんは十分魅力的だよ。むしろ僕みたいな男のために貴重な休日を割いてもらったのが申し訳ないくらいだよ。
確かに私はとても大切な研究のために生涯を捧げたつもりだけど、それだけじゃ人生は潤いがないもの。たまには頭を切り替えて遊ぶことも大事だし、それに異性とのコミュニケーションは脳の活性にもとてもいいんだから。
僕ごときで高野さんの頭の気分転換のお役に立ててるならいいんだけどね。
死ねや補助。村の空気を吸う資格はねえ。今すぐ息止めて死ね。
なめんなボケがぶっ殺したら前に出るクソバは。おい引っ込まんかいデカボリ。
よう抜かした。よう抜かした補助の。この園崎俺は久々に頭血のぼってきよったわ。
Fight! 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 Fight!
まだお父さんのこと怒ってるのかい
He threw an ashtray at me.
違うだろう。
No, it happened with our previous father. Our current one hasn't done that. He locked me out in the veranda. He didn't feed me lunch. He complained I got him the wrong brand of cigarettes. Then he slapped my face saying I shouldn't be a picky eater.
それから。
She isn't talking about our current stepfather. Things about all of our different stepfathers had mixed themselves up in her head. My father has become abnormally nice to me recently. He started to act that way ever since I made the fake call. I know for sure it's just a part of the plot to kill me. So I won't let them trick me. I'm sorry. Lately, when I listen very carefully, I can hear a voice apologizing. The voice sounds familiar to mine. Her mother must be telling her that she shouldn't have been born. I'm sorry. But I won't apologize like that. I'll live. I'm going to strike back. I'll kill before I get killed. I'm sorry. I only wanted to ease her pain. But I ended up rubbing salt in her wound. How can I call myself her best friend? If I could, I would have crushed the candy right there.
きっと村の外からしがらみにとらわれない人がやってきます。
そうだね。ダム戦争も終わったんだから、 また分譲地に外から人が引っ越してきてくれるといいね。近い年の転校生とか来れば楽しいだろうに。
来ます。きっと。そして彼と力を合わせて私たちは村の悪兵を打ち破るのです。それが私たちの未来を閉ざす3つの錠前に対する最初。
え？何それ？なんかの小説？
And so it continues. Greetings, my name is Neosekken, and welcome back to my Let's Play Higurashi When I Cry Kai Chapter 8. I am ready to continue connecting some more fragments. I want some more truth! Plus to get the game board set up here for our final showdown, of course, but right now, I want some truth. So, what do we want to do next? Capsules required. I don't think we can look at any of these yet. I think I want to try to stick to the first 5 pages first. Got the Queen Carrier thing, right? Okay. No, I don't think so. Research needs to have stagnated. Okay, we've already seen that with one of the tips here. There's research stagnated and operations for the kidnapping operation. I am not sure if we've seen that yet, even though the whole, even though we've seen the discussions of the talk of applying pressure to the Minister of Construction were discussed here. Death of Koizumi Sensei. Rock candy as a tree is acquired. Okay, I think we can look at this one. Suffering of Big Brother. Oh, fuck me. Never mind. I think it was this one I was actually thinking about. The Hojo family is well known for going against the whole village during the dam conflict. Both the husband and the wife were rather aggressive, and they fought a fierce battle, especially against the Sonozaki family. Although the whole village treated them coldly, the husband and wife didn't really care, and kept on fighting. In a way, they were extremely strong-willed people. I'm sure their children had to go through a lot because of them, though. Satoko-chan and Satoshi-kun were treated coldly by the villagers as well. In addition to that, Satoko-chan and her stepfather didn't get along, so their stress levels must have reached their limit. Because I'm the director of the local clinic, a rather respected member of society, people usually tell me a lot of things. So I was aware of the treatment they were receiving even before I met them. I met Satoshi-kun first. Satoshi-kun came to the clinic because he felt ill from too much stress. He must have thought he had a cold. When I examined him, he even told me that. But hearing his repeated sighs and by seeing the exhausted look in his eyes, I knew right away it wasn't just a simple cold. Hinamizawa Syndrome, right? Medication would heal his symptoms, but that'd only be a temporary measure. The only way to truly cure him would be to change his living environment. But that was easier said than done. He was surrounded by tangled and complicated relationships with the village and his family, so just resting for a few days and taking some medication wouldn't do. Time was the only thing that could ease off the cold treatment from the villagers, but we were talking a very, very long time. That's why I felt I had to be their first ally in this village, so I could rescue them. I couldn't do anything about his stressful environment, but I could try to diminish the anxiety. So I thought the best way was to teach him how to vent his stress. And playing sports is the best way to do that. So I asked him to join the junior baseball team that I coach. So that's why you had him join. As a researcher, I devote most of my time to Hinamizawa Syndrome, but I too need to do something else to relax. I used to play baseball, so I decided to coach the local kids' team. After a while, the children of Hinamizawa started their own baseball team, and somehow, I became their coach. Doctors can't provide health just by giving medication. You need a sound mind and a sound body. I believe health can be maintained through sports as well. But our team needed more people, so I thought of asking Satoshi-kun to join. Being a bookworm, Satoshi-kun wasn't interested in playing sports. He wasn't sure how joining the baseball team would help his situation. I didn't need to go on and on about athletic medicine to explain why sports help people become healthy. I just wanted him to experience it himself, to realize how great it feels to play sports. I think he realized it gradually. He was reluctant until the very end, but he attended all the team activities and games. As I saw Satoshi-kun slowly regain his liveliness, I realized my plan worked. However, if Satoshi-kun was under that much stress, then Satoko-chan, who lived in the same family climate, must have felt the same way. Unfortunately, I didn't think of her back then. So when Satoko-chan was carried into my clinic as a patient, I regretted doing nothing about her even while knowing the situation. As Satoshi-kun recovered under my guidance, Satoko-chan was left alone in her stressful environment. And thanks to your neglect, that ultimately led to her becoming so stressed out of her mind that she ended up pushing her parents off a cliff, right? So that would technically mean that you're indirectly responsible for that happening, aren't you? Also around that time, there was an incident bad enough to make Satoko-chan collapse. That was, of course, her parents' deaths. The day of the Watanagashi festival was a very uncomfortable time for the Hojo family, because although it was a village festival, it was also a day to celebrate victory over the dam construction project. It's understandable that they would plan a family trip around that time, so they could leave the village. Satoko-chan's parents fell off the cliff at the park they were visiting. It happened on such an unlucky day. Because it happened on the day of Watanagashi, people said it was the curse of Oyashiro-sama. And people labeled the Hojo family as one that was cursed by Oyashiro-sama. The parents were given the cold shoulder by everyone in the village. So with their parents gone, Satoshi and Satoko should have been freed from that, but unfortunately, the accident happened on the day of Watanagashi. That's why the members of the Hojo family continued to be shunned. Satoko-chan was the only one who was at the site of the accident. Satoshi-kun didn't go on the trip because he had an event with the baseball team. Therefore, the police mainly interrogated her. The detective, Ooshi, suspected an act of organized crime by the village, so as Satoko-chan is the only witness on site, he drilled her with questions. She was as stressed as Satoshi-kun, perhaps even more, so of course she couldn't take it. During the interrogation, she began to wheeze and gasp for air. The anguished look I saw on Satoko-chan's face when she was carried into the clinic was very, very tragic. It broke my heart just to imagine what she had to go through.
監督、聡子は大丈夫ですか？
ええ、安心してください。一時的に混乱してしまっただけですよ。
あっても大丈夫ですか？
やっと薬でぐっすり眠れたところです。できれば起こさないであげたいところです。しばらくゆっくり休ませてあげましょう。様子を見て数日入院させてあげるのもいいかもしれません。大丈夫。私に任せてください。
ありがとうございます。
I know Satoshi-kun is a great big brother who truly cares about his sister. He empathizes deeply with her. In other words, Satoshi-kun's worries and stress were reflecting Satoko-chan herself. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but while Satoshi-kun was, of course, sad about his parents' deaths, he may at the same time have been a little relieved that they were gone. His sister wouldn't have to be driven to a corner anymore. Unlike Satoshi-kun, Satoko-chan didn't have the social skills to get along with her stepfather. So, putting her mother aside, I was certain that losing her father, the greatest cause of stress in her life, would bring great change to her home environment. Oh, how wrong you were. But I couldn't believe what happened next. The two were sent to live in an even worse environment with their aunt and uncle. Although at that time, I was rather optimistic, thinking this new environment would be better for the siblings. I still don't think we got Satoko's detailed test result from that. Okay, we got promise, bottle of wine for a toast. Okay, let's move on here. And let's move. Why not? Let's look here. Nothing. Come on. Speak to me. Wing carriers required. Fuck it, let's just give this a shot. Okay, I did have enough to connect that, alright. That very night, the head of the Furude family, the priest, gathered his wife and Rika together for a family meeting. In Hinamizawa, it was tradition for the three families to gather and discuss the village's issues. So it was unusual for big families like the Sonozaki family and the Kimiyoshi family to have meetings beforehand to sort out opinions amongst themselves. However, the Furude family had lost its branch families, so there were only 3 of them left. So until that day, they had never had a family meeting at all.
どうしたんですか、改まって。ひょっとしてダムに関わるお話ですか？
The dam was the most important issue in the village at the moment. The wife naturally assumed the priest wanted to talk about the dam. For him to gather all of them together like that, it must be a huge decision he had to make. Perhaps he was going to talk about joining the pro-evacuation camp.
いや、ダムの話ではない。だが、この村に関わる、いや、この村のご先祖様たちにも関わる、とても大事な問題だ。
The Fruit family had served in the priesthood of Oyashiro-sama, the guardian deity of the village, for generations. So for him, the head of the family, to start out that way, it must be something extremely important. Yet he said it wasn't about the dam. So what could he want to talk about?
私は入り婿だ。だから、フルデ家の本当の血を受け継ぐお前とリカにはよく聞いてほしい。お前たちは普通の人間ではないのだ。
僕はお社様の生まれ変わりなのですよ。
リカ、そういうのは口にしてはいけません。あなた、そういう話はリカのいないところでしましょう。それでなくっても集会所のお年寄りたちがリカに妙なことばかり吹き込んで。
そのお社様の生まれ変わりというのがどうも本当らしいのだ。
は？
少し長い話になる。二人ともしばらく黙って私の話を聞きなさい。
The wife had a dumbfounded expression on her face, not knowing what he was going to say, but Rika was completely relaxed, wearing her usual carefree expression. The priest started to talk after his wife calmed down.
この村には大昔からある病気があるのだ。それはこの地にだけある特別な病気、フード病というものらしい。
So you are aware of this thing.
それにはこの村に住む者が全員かかっている。今この村に住んでいる者だけではない。大昔から住んでいたご先祖様たちもみんなずっとこの病気にかかってきたのだ。
そんな、だって私たちはみんな普通に生活していますよ。この村だけの病気なんて聞いたこともない。
落ち着きなさい。その病気はな、この村にいる限り何も問題はないのだ。だがこの村を出て遠くの地へ行くと発病してしまう。わかるか？
わかるわけないでしょ。何のことだかさっぱり。
お社様のたたりと同じなのです。
Rika said so calmly while her mother became frustrated.
そうだ。この村から離れるとたたりがあるのと同じなのだ。つまりお社様のたたりだとご先祖様たちが代々恐れてきたのはこの村だけにしかないフード病のせいだったのだ。
そんなことあるわけないです。だって私たちだって時には村を離れることもあるじゃないですか。村の人だって仕事で遠くへ出かける人だっているし、海外に出かける人だって。
うん。それは長い時間を経て病気が徐々に弱まってきたかららしい。だからこのままさらに長い時間をかければ消えてなくなってしまうものだったのだ。だがそれがダム戦争のせいでおかしくなったらしい。ダム戦争で今村中が熱に浮かされたように興奮している状態にあるのはみんなも分かっているだろう。そういう興奮状態や情緒不安定な状態はこの病気を悪化させてしまうらしいのだ。
It really does paint the dam war in a much more negative light than it already was, to tell you the truth. Once you really stop to think, probably just how dangerously close that the whole freaking dam war got to the whole village basically becoming absolutely rife with Hinamizawa Syndrome. And then just think of the mess that would have caused everybody.
よく話がわかりませんけど、つまりこの大昔からたたりだと呼んできたものはすべてその病気の仕業だとおっしゃるんですね。
そうだ。お社様の作った決まりはすべてこの病気から村人を守るための決まりだったのだ。
そんな、それじゃお社様は神様ではなく病気が正体なんですか？そんなこと 古出家代々のご先祖様たちに説明できますか？
落ち着きなさい。お社様の信仰は変わらない。お社様がhinamizawaを見守ってくださることに何の変わりもない。お社様のたたりを再現する病気がこの村には大昔からあったということ、それだけなんだ。
そんなのは認められません。そんなこと亡くなった先代や先々代に説明できますか？古出家数百年の伝統に対する、いえお社様に対する冒涜です。そんなことをあなたに吹き込んだのは誰ですか？失礼極まりない。太一、そんな変な病気が実在するという証拠があるんですか？
Well, electron microscopes certainly can't, it would seem.
ある。
それはどんな？誰が？
厚生省と国立感染症予防研究所の方からだ。病原体もすでに特定され、現在治療方法などを研究している最中だという。先週実際にその資料や標本などを見せてもらった。厚生省の方はこの病気をhinamizawa症候群と呼んでいるらしい。
そんな。
hinamizawa症候群は普通に生活している分には何も影響のない無害だが、hinamizawaを遠く離れたり精神や情緒が不安定になったりすると発病しやすくなるという。発病すると妄想などに取りつかれ、最悪の場合異常行動に出ることもあるらしい。この病気は戦争中に発見されたんだそうだ。戦地でhinamizawaの兵隊だけ異常な病気を起こすことがあるのに、偉い学者の先生が気がついて研究がずっと進められてきたんだという。その辺の話はだいぶ詳しくしてもらったんだが、すまん。難しい内容だったので私の口からはこれ以上うまく説明できん。もし私の説明では納得できんというなら、お前も直接話を聞いてみればいい。私だって最初は何をバカなことを、お社様を冒涜する気かと憤慨していたのだから。その病気を研究するために入江診療所が作られたというんだ。あそこは表向きはただの診療所ということになっているが、実際は病気を調べるための隠し研究所らしい。
You just know everything, don't you?
秘密で研究しているなんてうさんくさいじゃないですか。それも厚生省がやっていることなら堂々とやればいいじゃないですか。
いや、そうはいかんらしい。この病気の実態を把握しないまま存在するという事実だけが不十分な知識で広まってしまったら、病気を持っている人たちはもちろんhinamizawaの人間は皆怪しげな病気にかかっていて、そのせいでとんでもないことをするかもしれないなどという噂が日本中に知れ渡ったら大変だ。厚生省もそのことを心配していて、この病気については厳重に伏せた上で治療を目指すらしい。勘違いするな。私たちを見せ物にするというんじゃないぞ。この病気を根絶させ、この村を病気から解放しようとしているのだ。自給自足ができていた大昔ならともかく、現代では村から一歩も出ずに生活など成り立たん。村から出るだけで発病するかもしれない病気など、村人にとってどれほど危険なものかわかるだろう。繰り返しになるが、昨今反ダム戦争で村全体が強い興奮状態にあって、hinamizawa症候群にとって非常に良くない状態にあるらしい。
もし村人がおかしくなって大変なことをしたら、きっと。
そうだ。うん。そうなったからでは手遅れなのだ。
そんな、いきなり言われても、本当に相手は国の人？変な詐欺に騙されてるんじゃないですか？
信用できんのも無理はない。先方は研究所はいつでも見に来ていいと言っている。私はもう見せてもらっているが、あれは詐欺とかそういうレベルではない。ゴグラの大病院でもあんな大掛かりな設備はないぞ。お前も私の話に納得できないなら、
研究所で詳しい話を聞かせてもらうといい。私よりもっと詳しく説明してくれるだろう。向こうは研究所の説明でも納得できないなら東京の国立研究所で説明してもいいし、厚生省の本庁舎で直接説明してもいいと言っている。
でも信じる信じないは別にして、それが私たちにどういう関係があるんです？
古出家は代々お社様の血を受け継ぐと言われている。そして8代続いて女子が生まれれば、その8代目はお社様の生まれ変わりであるとも。
そうですわ。私が7代目、リカが8代目。でもそれとその病気に何の関係があるというんです？
このhinamizawa症候群という病気はある種の寄生虫によるらしい。虫といってもものすごく小さい、人の目には決して見えんくらいに。その虫たちには親分格がいるというのだ。
まさかそれがフルデ家だとおっしゃるんですか？
その親分格の寄生虫は代々フルデ家の直系だけに受け継がれるらしい。つまり先代はお前、今はリカだ。
バカバカしい。そんな話やっぱりおかしいですわ。大体ですね、寄生虫なんてそんな気持ち悪いもの。
Ask the swamp gods.
だから落ち着きなさい。私では説明が下手だ。専門の人に説明を受けなさい。そして彼らが言うには、この病気の治療を研究するためには親分格の研究が不可欠だというのだ。
嫌です。そんな怪しげな研究まっぴらごめんですし、リカだってそんな研究には関わらせません。
だから落ち着きなさいというのに。彼らの研究ではhinamizawa症候群は村から離れると発病するのではなく、親分格から離れると発病するということらしいのだ。お前も小さかった頃、村人から陣痛力があると言われていたことがあるだろう。遠方に出かけ片頭痛などにかかったお年寄りがお前に払ってもらうとたちまち頭痛が消えたという陣痛力、それこそが親分格の証拠でもあるというのだ。フルデの血には発病者を救う力がある。それを研究するのは治療薬を見つけるためにもとても重要なことなのだそうだ。
僕を研究すると村のみんなが助かるのですか？
先方はそう言っている。
その病気は村の全員がかかっているのですか？僕もみんなも里子も。
村に住む人間全員だけでなく、沖宮に住む親類なども全て含むそうだ。多分何千人という規模になるだろう。それだけの大変な病気だから、厚生省がわざわざたくさんの予算を投じて専門の研究所を作ってくれたのだ。
私は反対です。リカをそんな怪しげな研究の生贄にするだなんて。
僕はいいのですよ。僕が生贄で里子が助かるなら全然平気なのです。
Sacrifice, so could this be used for one of the sacrifice fragments?
リカは黙っていなさい。
No, don't be quiet. I need any leads.
とにかくあなたにそんな妙なことを吹き込んだ人たちには私が直接会ってはっきりとお断りをします。
I reject you, lab men.
リカを変な実験で殺されてたまるものですか？
When did how did you get kill from this?
リカはフルデ家のたった一人の跡継ぎなんですよ。もしものことがあればフルデの血はここで絶えてしまうかもしれないじゃないですか。あなたはもっとですね、フルデの家のことを考えていただかないと。そんなだから村の人たちに日和見主義とかなんとか言われて。
Opportunist, I definitely know what I could use this little thing for.
だいたいおかしいじゃないですか。建設省は村をダムに沈める。 厚生省は村の病気を治す。何が何だかさっぱりわからないです。
厚生省はこの病気は環境の変化で大変発病しやすいと警告していて、建設庁に対しダム計画を中止するよう働きかけてくれているそうだ。だからお前も研究所を見せてもらいなさい。あれだけの大設備をダム湖に沈むかもしれない土地に建てるわけがない。
Rika let out a big yawn. It was long past bedtime for a little girl like her.
僕はもう寝ますです。父さん、僕はいつでも協力するとその人たちに言っておいてくださいなのです。
リカ、そんなことお母さんに断りなく勝手に決めちゃいけません。リカ、待ちなさい。リカ。
Denied. Also, Mommy dearest, what good would her consulting you do when you're just going to deny her request anyway? Just asking. Okay, so we can get... No, where is the request? Okay, wait, we already just did this one. What am I talking about? So we got, I guess we can look at this one now, and as also... Third sacrifice? I'll save this one after this first one here at the with this quarry. Help from the Queen Carrier is required. When researching Hinamizawa Syndrome, there is something very important that needs to be discussed first. If something happens to the Queen Carrier, the village will collapse. In his article, my grandfather called it the most dangerous situation. According to my grandfather, if the Queen Carrier dies, all the infected persons will go terminal within 48 hours. This may sound unbelievable at first, but research on the collapse of past local religions and group suicides around the world should indicate that there's some truth to it. Among all the mysterious incidents around the world, there are some that were caused by parasites controlling entire communities, very similar to Hinamizawa Syndrome. Grandfather picked a few cases that are very similar to his syndrome and investigated them. As a result, he confirmed multiple cases of entire communities losing their minds after the death of a religious leader or founder, and finally annihilating themselves. He stated that, on average, it happened within 48 hours. It's clear that infected people are affected by the Queen Carrier, and the condition of the Queen Carrier is in fact affecting the entire village. Our statistics already proved that on weeks Rika felt sick and visited the clinic, we saw an exceptionally high number of visitors. Rika being sick with a simple cold had a massive impact. If something particularly bad happened to her, we'd be facing a serious situation within 48 hours. That's why the Irie Institute has to protect Rika Farud, the Queen Carrier. It's the most important mission of the Hinamizawa Syndrome research project. She's already agreed to help us in our research, but we have to be very careful not to put her in any danger. Also, we have to protect her from anyone who would try to harm her. Her life is equal to the lives of 2,000 villagers. But what if something happens to her by accident? The Irie Institute must prepare for that situation. That's why I worked on the draft of an emergency manual when the Irie Institute was first established. Emergency manual, I could use that for that one other fragment I saw. It's a precaution in case the Queen Carrier dies, or if infected people show acute symptoms due to the death of the Queen Carrier. This is an emergency procedure which must be followed within 48 hours of the mass occurrence of the acute symptoms. the final measures to prevent the damage from spreading to nearby areas. The plan uses gas, making it look like a natural disaster. My client, the Alphabet Project, took the responsibility of working out the details of the plan. They are used to dealing with things like nuclear and biological weapons, so they ended up being such a big help. There's no way I could have come up with a plan on my own to execute 2,000 villagers. Through a dummy company, the ground SDF has secured a closed quarry in the Yaguchi region, upstream of Hinamizawa. It's to be the secret storage base for the equipment we'd use in that operation. Equipment that sprays deadly gas that kills people, as if they were falling asleep, is stored there. Here. In case of an emergency, a special unit of the ground SDF is to use this equipment to destroy the village. However, preparing for the execution of the villagers itself is politically dangerous. So, if I'm going to insist on them getting the equipment ready, I have to make them understand how dangerous Hinamizawa Syndrome is, and also how urgent the need is to have a contingency plan. I have to prove the need for the plan by showing them enough data. So the files my grandfather kept intact come in quite handy. When the clients read my grandfather's articles about the syndrome, they were surprised to see how catastrophic things could be in a worst-case scenario.
つまり女王である一人の少女に何かがあれば村人2000人以上が全員錯乱するということなのですね。
はい。南沢症候群に極めて類似するいくつかのケースでは集団自殺を示すものが少なくありませんが、南沢症候群の場合、強い疑心暗鬼や過剰なまでの危機意識から何かの過剰防衛を行う可能性があり、被害は感染者2000人にとどまらないものと推定されます。それらは無政府状態の暴動から始まり、猟奇的なあるいは宗教的終末感にも似た異常な状況を作り出すでしょう。これに対する事前の鎮圧策を用意しなかった場合、世界の注目を浴びることは避けられません。また、その猶予は事態発生から48時間しかありません。
つまり、いざことが起こったらもう誰にも防げないということですな。
感染者全員を48時間以内に全員治療することは不可能なのかね。
無理だろう。それに治療方法すら確立していないし、研究所の規模では村人全員の救済は物理的に不可能だ。
しかしこのような恐ろしく珍しい病気があるとは世の中わからんもんですな。
常に最悪の事態に備えることは国防にも通じますし、我々アルファベットプロジェクトの理念でもあります。そして使うことが目的なのではなく、備えることそのものが肝要なのです。
確かにおっしゃる通りですな。運用規定については決済区分の強化などまだ検討したいところはありますが、最悪の事態に対応する準備が必要だということは理解できました。
都市沈黙船の研究班に南沢地区沈黙船のシミュレーションをさせましょう。これは至急行われる必要があると思います。
こうしている間にも女王感染者の少女が車にはねられて死んでしまう可能性だってあるのですから。高野さんさ、ありがとう。また質問しますので着席してくださって結構です。
Thanks to a push from one of my backers, things were decided without too much of a problem. It took me almost a day to explain it to them, but only took a short time to come to a decision. Nobody criticized, ridiculed, or tried to reject my grandfather's articles out of hand. In the files they're all reading today, they are the very same shameful articles those haughty authorities left their footprints on as they trampled them and my grandfather's heart. But they aren't ridiculing the articles. They are reading what was once rejected. It's nothing big at a glance, but in this moment, my grandfather's research is being recognized for the first time. My heart is filled with satisfaction to see people discussing amongst each other while pointing to my grandfather's files and raising them as proof. I've worked so hard for this day. Grandpa in heaven, can you see this? I want to save the sacrifice fragments for last if at all possible, because I want to see from first to last exactly how all the previous murders and disappearances throughout the years of Oyashiro-sama's curse were carried out in sequential order. So, I'm going to focus on everything else in the meantime. Now, let's see what I can get. Red capsule. Wait, what about this? Okay, not that. Pad of apologies are required. I'm going to assume I can look at this. Fuck! Okay, guess not. Possibly this one. Okay, let's give this one a shot. Depression of a Shinto priest. The gathering place inside of the Farude Shrine is in fact the headquarters of the Onikafuchi Guardians. Normally, a shrine should be a calm and quiet place, but there are anti-dam signs everywhere, making it very obvious that what this location has become. There are over 30 members of the Guardians here at the moment, and they are having a heated conversation about their plans for the future. Although this meeting place is on the Farude family's property, it's a community facility, so it closes at 9 p.m. Of course, sometimes a discussion gets so heated that it goes on past closing time, but meetings are supposed to end by 9. If discussion ends early, they usually chit-chat until that time. That's what usually happens. Of course, they mostly talk about the dam even when they chit-chat. They talk about someone's mistreatment at the government office, or someone getting arrested unjustly, or complain that people at the dam construction site are being too violent. I just had a completely random thought, but since we know that Rika likes to drink wine, if Rika ever gets drunk enough, does a huge portion of Hinamizawa and Okinomiya's population end up getting well, you know, hangovers or anything like that the following morning, if Rika does too, or at least slight headaches? I'm sorry, I'm moving back on now. Since it's idle chatter, the topics are slightly emotional, and because of that, there was a good deal of bad-mouthing the Hojos. Oh wait, did I just skip a damn thing? Yes, I did. They talk about someone's mistreatment at the government office, or someone getting arrested unjustly, or complain that people at the damn construction site are too violent. Okay, we read that, we read this.
普通に考えてそんなことするかね。
あそこの奥さんはさ、ちょっとこの間もさ、ゴミ置き場で牧野さんとこのばあさんとすんげえ口論してて。
だいたいなんていうかね、本当に粗暴だよね、あそこのご主人は。理性がないというか。ああ、お前さんは地元説明会の時を見てないのかい？ありゃすごかったよな。あそこまで言うからにゃもう村にはおれんよ。さっさと出てけばいいのにさ。金がもらえないのどうのこうの、あさましいったらありゃしないね。
いや、理性のなさで言ったらあそこの奥さんも相当なもんだよ。
それで、いや、あそこのお嬢さん買い物によく見かけるんで挨拶するんだけど、向こうから挨拶は絶対に返さないのよ。だから私たちバカバカしくなっちゃって、以来見かけても知らないふりしてんだから。
それ言ったらあそこの坊主もいっつも暗そうな顔してるよな。
A child's depression isn't funny, you dick. By now, the Hojo family has become the enemy of the whole village. Bad-mouthing the Hojo family was the greatest shared topic that anyone could easily contribute to. If he had known how powerful the three families were, especially the Sonozaki family, and if he had known Oryu-san's character, he wouldn't have said the things he did. The Hojo couple are residents here. Though they were never very enthusiastic about the council activities, they should have known what kind of person Oryu-san is. He could have imagined just what would happen to him if he talked to her that way. Yet he let his anger take over and voiced his unpleasant feelings. So most people think the Hojo family brought their isolation upon themselves. If they not wanted to negotiate with the government regarding the move, they should have done so privately. Yet he was foolish enough to express himself at a public gathering like that. So not too many sympathize with the Hojo family. Ever since the big fight at the explanatory meeting, the Sonozaki family has looked at the Hojo family as their enemy, and started to go after them. That caused the other pro-Dan families to go quiet, fearing they'd be made into scapegoats too, and those who wanted to leave were bitterly forced to give up. Even those people started criticizing the Hojo couple, saying they could have gotten their compensation to leave if the two hadn't picked that reckless fight. Both the anti-Dan and pro-Dan people hate the Hojos now, and the family has become even more isolated. Moreover, the Hojos are both very aggressive. They should have stayed quiet at least until things settled down, but they didn't. That alienated the handful of people who took pity on them as well, so now nobody even says anything to them. All that was immediately obvious by listening to the foul talk here and there at the gathering place. Rika always helps out by putting the teacups away, so I'm sure she hears what they say as well. One of the Hojo family members they're bad-mouthing is Rika's friend, Satoko-chan. It hurts to think about what Rika feels while hearing that. As priest of the Farood Shrine, should I let this continue? Oyashiro-sama is a god who makes peace between enemies. When the humans and demons fought, Oyashiro-sama descended from heaven and mediated between both sides. As the caretaker of this shrine, I must do something before it goes too far. I'm sitting next to Oryu-san, who is spitefully disparaging the Hojo family. You do, apparently.
大親代様のたたりが下るんね。許されなかといな。
The elderly people cheer her on as they listen to her speak. If I barge in now, I have a feeling it won't be a peaceful conversation. But I have to make up my mind. As a priest of the Fruit Shrine. Also for the sake of Rika's friend, Satoko-chan.
お嬢さん、北条さんの悪口を言うのはそろそろこれくらいにしませんかね。
はあ、なんね、何倍よりおるんかいな。
いや、北条さんもそんな悪気はなかったと思うんだが、あまりいつまでも尾を引くのはかわいそうだと。
しゃーらしいね。おめあれを聞いちゃどんなすったらんわんとね。なあ、しゃーらしい。ああ、しゃーらしい、しゃーらしい。
Ori-san is the head of the Sonozaki family, the heir to the demons. She never forgives anyone who stands against her. So there's no way she would even listen to what I'm trying to say. Oryu-san and the others became furious and refused to listen to me. I also mentioned that the dam construction plan will be cancelled soon, so they should calm down already. I said that because the staff at the Irie clinic told me that the government is putting some kind of pressure on the Ministry of Construction. But thinking that I'm being an opportunist, soon criticism of me began to circulate the room. After that, I realized I'd become branded as a fence sitter. If the demons are willing to listen, then there's a chance to make peace. But how can I make peace with people who refuse to listen? I destroyed their mood. So I should just give up and shut my mouth. Then I felt a little hand on my back.
リカか。もう遅い時間だから家に戻っていなさい。
私たちがいくら努力しても届かない。
Rika looked into the distance while she spoke.
このよどみ切った村の悪兵は、そのよどみに住まう私たちにはどうしようもないのかもしれない。でも希望をなくすものか。今にきっとこいつらを打ち破ってくれる人がやってくる。今にきっと。
Her eyes shone, as if seeing a future that only the maiden of the Fruit Shrine could see. Don't worry, Keiichi. We'll get to you soon enough. Okay, wait. Suffering a big brother. Where's the Shinto priest one I tried earlier? Oh wait, I just did that, didn't I? Oh damn it, I can't even keep track of which fragments I'm even going for right now. Capsules required. I definitely know what I'll need that for. I want to say I can do this one now, but I want to double check real fast. Other things. Rika Fruit's high fever is required, so maybe they actually meant her cold? And we've already seen a fragment that took mention of Tomotake's slight fever, so I could probably do this one too. Let me try a murder of a dismembered body.
腐ってねえ。やべえよやべえよ。監督返事してくださいよ監督。
本当だ。死んでるに決まってんだろうが。
A loud noise snapped everyone out of it. Someone dropped the shovel he was holding. The shovel was smeared with reddish-black blood. No, not just the shovel. All 6 construction workers' clothes were blood-soaked, too. One of them cried out to the silent dead body of the manager, which was drenched in blood.
監督。
やかましい。死んでるに決まってんだろ。仕方ねえじゃねえか。正当防衛だろ。正当防衛。
So I guess I can write off any theory I've ever had here about the construction manager being assassinated by the mountain dogs or anything like that. The fight had started after the manager yelled at them for drinking beer inside the office. There were no drinking and no smoking signs everywhere. The manager harshly scolded anyone who broke that rule. So it was the 6 workers' fault for disobeying. But they drank because they were stressed out by the anti-dam protesters. That's why they said things to provoke the manager. They told him to step out. And the others went along. The construction workers toiled hard and long hours. That's why they instigated the fight with the manager, to release their stress. They expected to just curse at each other, or to end up in a wrestling match. But things escalated. Or to put it more accurately, the manager exploded all of a sudden. The manager had to deal with the residents' protests as well, so he was under just as much pressure, or maybe even more. But how he changed was not normal. The manager was calm at first, but he gradually became more aggressive. It was like he transformed into someone completely different. No, it was like he was possessed by something evil. Hinamizawa Syndrome, right? The men who instigated the fight sobered up when they saw his behavior. Then, the manager picked up a shovel that was nearby and tried to smash his opponent's head in with it. He managed to avoid the hit, but if he didn't, his head would have surely been split open. The manager kept pounding on him with the shovel, even as he frantically tried to avoid the hits. By this time, the workers had realized this was beyond a simple fight, so they tried to hold the manager down. But the manager turned on them with the shovel too. One of the men tried to protect himself by crossing his arms above his head. But there was no way that could have blocked a shovel swung with such force. Blood spurted out, and the men groaned in pain. By this time, the 6 men had realized the manager was not his usual self. This manager would try to bash in their brains without hesitation. Since their opponent was using a shovel as his weapon, they had to find some kind of weapon too. One of them grabbed a huge hammer. Then the others realized they needed to find something as well. To restrain the manager in that condition, it was better to arm themselves.
こんなつもりじゃなかったのに。
It didn't take that long for the madness to infect the 6 workers. It was only a matter of time before they went from restraining him to lynching him. By the time they realized what had happened, the manager was already a lump of meat. His face was swollen, shreds of skin had been torn off, and his muscles and skull were visible too. Obviously, he was quite dead.
ふざけんじゃねえよ。俺たちは殺されかかったんだぞ。こいつが襲いかかってこなけりゃ俺たちだって反撃しなかったんだぞ。
The leader of the Six, the one who instigated the fight, tried to bring the rest to his side, but nobody replied. And so, the leader became frustrated. He was the one who started the fight. The rest simply joined in. He was the main perpetrator. Maybe that's why he was feeling so exasperated. He sensed that he was the one at fault.
いつまでもなよなよしてんじゃねえ。仕方ねえだろ。やっちまったもんは仕方ねえだろ。俺たちな、もう殺人犯なんだよ。覚悟を決めるんだよ。
まさかおめえら自首して懲役食らいてえなんて思ってんじゃねえだろうな。冗談じゃねえよ。無所なんかこの年で言ってられっかよ。
隠すんだよ。こいつの死体を隠してすっとぼけるしかねえんだ。
Some of them knew he was on probation for an assault incident once before. So if he got in trouble with the law again, the punishment would be more severe than they could imagine. That was why he was trying desperately to find a way out. If he alone was alone with the manager's body, then he wouldn't have behaved this way. All he would have had to do was hide the manager's body and pretend nothing happened. But there were 6 of them, including him. They were partners in crime, and witnesses too. If even one of them turned himself in out of guilt, he'd be in big trouble.
でも死体なんか隠したってバレるよ、いずれ。それより正当防衛ってことでちゃんと主張して、その過剰防衛くらいで勘弁してもらえねえかな。
Well, by all appearances, you wouldn't be lying.
黙ったれたこと言ってんじゃねえ。実際に殺しちまったんだぞ。過剰防衛で済むかよ。もう取り返しのつかないところまでやっちまったんだぞ、バカ野郎。
でもよ、どう隠したって監督がいなくなったのは明日の朝にはバレちまうんだ。どうしようもねえよ。
どうしようもねえのはおんどれの頭じゃ、ボケ。
He slapped the other man in the face. The leader had such an evil look in his eyes.
いいか、ボケども。俺たちは殺人犯なんだ、殺人犯。ぐずぐず言ってりゃ5年6年食らい込まれちまうんだよ。俺らの中に一人裏切り者がおってみろ。全員が捕まっちまうんだよ。懲役をなめんな。どうせ捕まる覚悟なっちゅうんなら死ぬ気で逃げまくってやるんだ。年貢の納め時になったら好きなだけ覚悟決めりゃいいんだ。
His visage turned more and more demonic. It was the same expression the manager had just a few minutes before. Was he possessed by the same thing that possessed the manager? The 5 men started to think that way. Now that they considered it, all the villagers in the anti-dam protests had the same expression on their faces too. The real name of Hinamizawa was Onikafuchi Village. People said that wicked demons lived there, and sometimes they possessed people. The men couldn't help but to recall that exaggerated story often told by the demonstrators. The manager swung the shovel after his expression changed into that demonic one. There was no guarantee this man wouldn't do the same. In fact, he was still squeezing the hammer in his hand, glaring at everyone and threatening them. If someone suggested surrendering, he'd probably smash their head in with it.
そうだ。裏切り者を出さんためにな。いいこと思いついたわ。死体も隠しやすくなって一石二鳥だぞ。
どんな手だい？
We're gonna cut up the body to 6 pieces. They all wanted to object to the idea. Killing him was a serious crime itself. Dismembering the body would be too much. But if anyone objected, he'd be killed on the spot. So no one said anything. We'll all cut him up together.
この野郎が日頃言ってんだろ。共同作業だよ。全員腹をくくれよ。そこで分けて持った証拠は各自が責任を持って隠すんだ。な。これなら全員仲良くしはんだろう。自分だけ罪が軽いから自首しようなんてずる抜けは許されってわけさ。
The 5 men were all taken in by his ghastly face, and they could even feel the fear of the Onagafuchi demons creep up their backs. It was all an accident, all along, caused by Hinamizawa Syndrome. The damn construction manager's death wasn't pre-planned. It was completely on the spur on the moment, in a moment of self-defense by these workers. I was totally wrong about how this whole thing played out in reality. So that would that mean then that would then mean that through this accident, this accidental death caused by the syndrome, the idea for the curse of Hinamizawa was born in the minds of those who know the truth behind what likely happened, and so they helped instigate the whole thing, along with the Sonozaki family and Oryu, who just decided to take credit for the whole thing in their indirect way of doing just that sort of thing. So they inadvertently ended up helping things along. Either that or it's the other way around, and they just came up with the idea, and well, the Irie clinic and everyone who likely knew what actually happened just went along with it. And meanwhile, they just took this as inspiration here for probably the other deaths in the following years too. Either way, somebody clearly looked at what happened here and got a few ideas later on. So yes, Oyashiro-sama's curse was born entirely on accident, and from there it was likely hijacked by Takano and took on a new life of its own. Wasn't expecting to actually see the first murder take place right then and there, but well, considering that it looks like as though I'm going to need to look at some of the fragments relating to the murders here in order to access some of the non-related murder fragments. Maybe I shouldn't be so stingy about looking at the other murders until the last minute. I'm gonna go ahead and move on. Okay, we can definitely look at this, the old guy. I don't know what to say. I want to say something, but I can't think of the right words. I can only sigh.
ああ、大石さん。探したんすよ。課長から手配写真の。
静かにせい。ここは騒ぐ部屋ではないぞ。
As Kumagai barged into the room, the old coroner quickly snapped back at him.
すみません。ですね。課長が容疑者の手配写真について。
ああ、それ小宮山君に相談してくれませんかね。ちょいと私じい様と話がありまして、すぐに上がりますと上に言っといてください。
あ、わかりました。
Kumagai ran out of the autopsy room with the same haste he entered in.
賑やかな男だの。
おやっさんだったらやかましいって言って。
お前さんも少し上に戻った方がいいぞい。ここの空気は慣れんやつには合わん。
そうですね。あんまりサボってると私もげんこつを食らっちまいそうです。
獅子骨界隈じゃチンピラも避けて通るお前さんをツモの切り方が悪いとげんこつを食らわせてきたのは後にも先にもこいつだけだったの。
容赦のない人だったな。本当の親父よりげんこつもらった気がしますよ。
本当も嘘もないわい。お前さんが本当の親父だと信じてたならこいつも本当の親父だ。
My real father passed away in Nagoya. He was unlucky. If he wasn't given the order to move to a plant in Nagoya, he wouldn't have died in an air raid. I think I might vaguely be aware of this incident that he's referring to. If he could have rode it out another half or a year or so, then the war would have been over. I was sad, of course, but I was grown up enough by then that I didn't cry into the ground like my mother did. But people feel sadness in different ways. For some people, it comes all at once as an overwhelming wave, but others feel sadness gradually, over a long period of time. I think I was the latter. When he was alive, I only thought of him as annoying. In my mind, I even cursed him with questions about why he avoided the draft. Now I thought my feelings toward him would always be the same. Then the war ended. As I saw families and friends being reunited with joy as they came home from the front, it finally happened. I grieved for my father's death. Japan was filled with people who were sad and full of despair. I knew I wasn't the only one whose life ended up that way. But I remember I was very, very heartbroken. After the war, the nation completely changed. As a policeman, the environment I worked in went through sudden changes too. In order to forget my sorrow, the only thing I could do was devote myself to my work.
当時私はいろんな取り締まりをやらされてましたね。食料とか生活必需品を非合法な手段で買い込む人たちを、そりゃあもうゾロゾロ引っかかりましたっけ。僕らのあたりは物が豊かで、そういった物を手に入れるのにかなり都合が良かったそうなんですよ。
After the war, Japan faced a chronic shortage in food supply. To those ends, the nation instituted a food rationing program by signing the Food Control Act. The rations the government provided weren't even close to being enough to feed families. Therefore, people had no choice other than buying food and supplies on the black market. The government hardly had enough food for rations, but there were somehow plenty on the black market. The dealers there sold it at outrageous prices, and some of them became quite wealthy. The Sonozaki family made their money through that black market, but that's another story. The government didn't bother arresting these dealers. For, with their money, they were able to buy off the top members of the police department. Instead, they decided to go after the people buying the goods, and even confiscated the rice they bought by selling everything they owned. Yeah, that totally... Well, I could totally see this sort of thing not brewing any resentment towards the government. Yeah, I remember that. Wasn't there a prosecutor who starved himself to death? Yeah, there was. The prosecutor who vowed not to eat illegal rice starved to death. Wasn't it in 1947? It was horrible. He, a public prosecutor, proved it himself that people couldn't survive by adhering to the law. What a freaking hardcore badass way to go. That prosecutor had grown tired of the government charging people with doing whatever they could to survive. And he proclaimed that he was never going to buy black market rice again. In 1947, he starved to death when he was only in his mid-30s. The law prohibited people from buying black market rice, but that was the only way to survive. In that case, was the Food Control Act a bad law itself? The death of the prosecutor was seen as a desperate message to the government about the injustice of that law. We rounded up people with bags of rice and lined them up at the temporary inspection point next to the station. It was like a military tribunal. We inspected their bags and confiscated everything that they bought at the black market.
ご婦人方はみんな泣かれるんですよ。
They sold everything they owned to buy the rice. They pleaded that if we confiscated the rice, how would they feed their starving children?
道理だな。
Yet they forbade you from going after the sellers. So it was absolutely unfair from the view of the people. Everyone was on edge. If they heard a police inspection was set up at the next station, they'd jump off the train and run. We were aware of these people, so we set up several officers near jump-off spots in order to capture them. I remember chasing after women carrying several kilos of rice on them. That was when I first met the old man.
いやー、驚きましたよ。私の親父にね、あまりにもそっくりだったんですよ。私はね、てっきり死んだと思っていた親父が帰ってきてくれたんじゃないかなって本気で思いましたよ。
I was chasing a man who was running away from the inspection point. There was no way for him to run with a heavy bag of rice on him. So either he'd get arrested with the illegal rice, or escape by ditching the rice that he bought by selling all of his belongings. In other words, if a person is being chased by the police, that person can't provide his family any rice to eat. Of course, I feel guilty about that. I knew people had to buy the rice to survive. So we had a tacit agreement to let those who ditched the rice and ran get away. So I always thought the same thing as I chased him. Them, please throw it away. I didn't want to catch him, because I didn't want to hear him crying and pleading in distress. It was then that the old man showed up. He looked exactly like my dead father. I was dumbfounded. Then, all of a sudden, he punched me in the head. If a father disciplines you, as a child, you lower your head in apology. I was so happy to see my father alive that I couldn't hold my joy in. The old man said, "Let him go." When I heard his voice, I realized he wasn't my father, so I thought I'd arrest him for assaulting a policeman. But a young man like me, who'd barely grown any hairs yet, was no match for an older man used to fighting.
いや、たっぷり説教をもらいましたよ。大通りの真ん中で ぶちのめされた挙句に普通に考えたらそんなのに耳なんか傾けないですよね。でもあの時の私はどうかしてたんです。どうしてもおやっさんが親父に見えちゃって、おとなしく言うことに耳を傾けることしかできなかったんです。
まあそこで小づいただけじゃなく、男の器量もきっちりと見せられたのがこいつの大したところだったの。今時じゃすっかり珍しくなっちまった古き良き時代の生き残りじゃった。
Despite my age, I still needed a father. I needed someone to look up to, and to show me what makes a man a man. When I think about it, I really did have two fathers. The old man was a father, a brother, and my best friend. But now, here he lies with his head, body, arms, and legs all dismembered, and his right arm hasn't been found. He taught me how to be a man, how to enjoy alcohol, how to play mahjong, and with that right arm, he gave me a good beating when I did something wrong. But that right arm is still missing.
星の目星は？
ねえ、もちろんついています。おやつさんの右腕ももちろん取り返しますし、この借りもきっちり返します。
They're running Hinamizawa from the shadows and eliciting this collective crime they call the dam protests. The Sonozaki family. I declare war within myself. I already know who my enemy is. And you are dead wrong, my friend, on who your enemy is. I knew the damn foreman meant a lot to Ooshi, but holy shit. Basically a substitute father figure? Now I think I really truly understand why exactly him solving the curse by Oyashiro-sama really matters to him so much. I sympathize with him, but all the same, I feel bad here because he's just so wrong about his understanding of the situation. It's tragic, really. Let's look for another one. Let's go back to one. We could probably definitely look at the first sacrifice for sure. Starting to think that I should probably look at the first murder. Yeah. Screw it. Sorry, the first sacrifice, excuse me. A live specimen for research is required. A tragedy at the dam construction site is required. I was half asleep, so I didn't even hear the phone ringing nearby. After a while, I finally realized the phone was ringing. And a ringing phone means there's some kind of emergency. It's 2 in the morning. Who would even call me at this time of the night?
もしもし、入江です。
お休みのところ申し訳ございませんわ、入江所長。
It's Takano-san. She's never called me for a personal reason. At the Institute, she's ranked just below me, so she's basically responsible for running it. So for her to call me this late at night, it must be an emergency.
遅くなりました。末期患者が出たというのは本当ですか？
ええ、 生きた検体が欲しいと思っていたら本当に運よく。
I initially thought that she abducted someone. The man had already been moved to the research area in the clinic's basement. Having been tied down to the examination table, he's struggling against his restraints, but more as though he's deranged and actually resisting. He's the missing sixth guy, isn't he? I can't even understand what he's saying. He sounds angry, sorrowful, and like a child throwing a tantrum all at once. It's obvious that he's not in the right state of mind.
とにかく麻酔で眠らせましょう。このままでは自分の舌を飲み込んで窒息しかねません。
もう少し状態を観察したかったのですけれど、仕方ありませんわね。
One of the staff of a white gown got the anesthesia ready. Even a normal person would struggle to escape a restraining table in this suspicious room. But this man's behavior is at an abnormal level. I'm sure Okinogi-san and his friends from the Mountain Dogs are the ones who captured him. Capturing a man in this state of mind couldn't have been an easy task. According to Takano, she ran into this patient on her way home from the clinic by accident. She brought him back here, tested him, and the result came back positive. Of course, I have no intention of just believing what she's telling me. But there is no question this man is at the terminal stage, and a live specimen is exactly what we need to research the syndrome.
一体この男は何者です？
あの男が持っていた新聞の包み、中に何が入っていたと思います？
これは何です？
There's something wrapped in a bloody newspaper on a tray nearby. Looking at the blood-drenched paper, I can only imagine there's something gruesome inside it. Yet Takano-san looked like she wanted to surprise me with something interesting.
これはひどい。
It's a bloody right arm. Well, that confirms it. The man on the table still has his. This right arm doesn't belong to him. So who does it belong to? I am used to looking at things like this as a doctor. But the horrible cross-section makes me want to look away. It wasn't done according to a medically acceptable method, that's for sure. It was obviously done out of cruelty.
状況から考えて、この男が切り取ったものと考えていいでしょうね。
つまり彼は近隣で起こった何らかの事件の犯人ということですね。
At that point, there was no way knowing who the right arm belonged to. But the next morning, the dismemberment murder of the damn construction site director was reported, and they mentioned that his right arm was still missing. So we learned who the arm belonged to.
この男、前科者だそうで、しかもその上執行猶予期間中だとか。にもかかわらず、また罪を犯してしまうなんて。それで殺人の発覚を恐れて遺体を隠そうと思ったのでしょうね。
状況にもよるでしょうが、懲役数年で済むというものではなさそうですね。
入江所長もこんな社会のクズが相手なら解剖に躊躇はないのでは？
社会のクズがさらに犯罪を重ね、さらにその上Hinamizawa症候群で凶暴化したのか、それとも前科を食いる善良な小市民がHinamizawa症候群で凶暴化して罪を犯したのか。前者ならともかく後者ならば彼には何の罪もありませんよ。
That's why Hinamizawa Syndrome is so terrifying. We can't tell if the syndrome is the cause of the crime, or if it's simply a problem of human nature. But what causes a defect of human nature in the first place? That was precisely Irie's area of research. Hate the crime, not the criminal. Can criminals only be corrected by punishing them with imprisonment? If a person commits a crime because of a mental disorder, but then gets treatment, he is corrected. In other words, there are no crimes in this world, only patients awaiting treatment without anyone else being able to understand them. In medieval times, patients with mental disorders were said to be possessed by demons, and they were either confined or killed. Centuries after, they were finally acknowledged as mentally ill people who needed treatment. Perception can change with time. Even if they are called criminals now, maybe after several centuries, those criminals will be acknowledged as patients who were entitled to appropriate treatment. Explain crimes through illness instead of malice. That's my life's work. Hinamizawa Syndrome is a strange disease that can support my theory. Solving its mysteries is extremely important to me. To solve those mysteries, I need a medical sacrifice. It's an extremely sinful thing to do, but there's no way to unravel this without it. The Irie Institute was authorized to take such drastic measures if necessary. That's why I was asked about it so many times when I accepted the position of director. And finally, the opportunity is here. This will be the first step of our research on this strange disease. But even now, I'm a little hesitant. I've opened up human bodies in many surgeries. What I'll be doing on this man is something very similar. But there's also something that's very different. What I did before was part of treatment. I did it to save the patients' lives. I did it so the patients could have a better future. But what I'm trying to do here isn't treatment. He will die at the end of it. His death will be far from humane. I'm going to violate nature and force him to stay alive, while I open up his living brain.
Irie 所長、聞いてらっしゃいます？
ああ、すみません。もう一度お願いします。
解剖計画書を提出し、東京に応援を要請した方が良いかと思います。何しろ、単に生きてるだけでなく、末期症状を起こしている大変貴重な検体ですもの。慎重な解剖が求められますわね。
そうですね。おっしゃる通りです。そのようにしましょう。
それまでに数日の猶予があると思います。そこで麻酔を解いていくつかの反応実験をしてみたいのですが。
危険ではありませんか？たとえ拘束を解かなくても何が起こるか分かりませんよ。
ようやく手に入った検体なんですもの。ただ脳を覗くだけじゃもったいないですわ。
Takano-san's unusual cheerfulness made me feel odd. Maybe her reaction is normal. Normal to who? Maybe I'm the one who's not reacting normally in this situation. I'm here only for the research. So I should be excited to have the opportunity to perform our first live dissection. But I'm still hesitant. How can I call myself a researcher? Researchers of the past were brave enough to cross the line, and that's how they accomplished many things. I've seen many brains. I've operated on them. I've lost some patients too. But I never thought anything of it, because I knew I did the right thing. Even my hard work was denied afterwards. If it pained me to think of that, then I just needed to advance the field of medicine to ensure their deaths weren't wasted. That's the true form of those advancing the field of medicine. Yet, why was my heart tormented so much just by changing the name from treatment to dissection? Probably because you're honestly describing what you're doing, maybe, and the implications that come with it. Does it mean that I'm not man enough to emulate those great men of the past who opened the doors to new medicine? I don't have the power to develop new advances myself?
あら、どうなさいましたの、所長。お休みのところを無理に起こしてしまったので、ご気分が優れませんのかしら?
Takano is pretending to be concerned about me, but she knows. She knows I'm still hesitating, and she's telling me that I should be ashamed, as a researcher, for feeling that way. I shook my head to clear it of sleepiness. Remember the resolve that brought me here to this day. I already have blood on my hands. But if I stop now, their lives will be wasted. Those who shed their blood can only rest in peace once they become the cornerstones of great research. I shook my head once more and reminded myself that I'm a researcher.
いえ、考え事をしていただけです。高野さんは東京との調整をお願いいたします。日程が決まりましたら教えてください。
ええ、了解いたしましたわ。眠気も吹っ飛んでしまいますわね。
The least I can do is my best, so his life won't be wasted. If he bleeds, I can't waste even a drop of his blood. After scolding my staff for their indiscretion of discussing the dissection with such excitement, I returned to my office. Well, that's one other big mystery solved. His disappearance. He ended up being used as a guinea pig until his dying breath. Just looking at the broken fragments real quick. Doesn't look like I can mess with them. So here's what I'm gonna do. I think I'm gonna do one more and then call it quits for now. So let's check out Irie's background. I've wanted to become a doctor ever since I was little. Doctors make a lot of money. People look up to doctors. I think those are the kind of reasons I had. So when I played with my friends, I always acted like a doctor. I cleaned their wounds and applied ice packs when my friends sprained their ankles, using what I learned from household medical books. Everyone, including me, believed that I'd be a doctor one day. My family was poor, so they praised me for that goal. They told me that I needed to study a lot to become a doctor, so they borrowed some pseudo-medical books from the local library for me. The rental fees weren't cheap, so I would speed read one book in a day, and the next day my parents would go back to the store to exchange it for a different book, saying they accidentally borrowed a book they already borrowed before. By doing so, my parents borrowed 2 books for the price of one. Of course, now I know those books were rather useless, but they were highly motivational just the same. My neighbors called me Dr. Kyosuke-kun, and I was always picked for class health officer at school. Even my teachers helped me with the classes I needed to become a doctor. Of course, in reality, becoming a doctor isn't as easy as it might seem. I had to study diligently, and the path was most definitely rough. To become a doctor, one must attend college. Since my family was poor, I was told I wasn't allowed to go to an expensive private school. so I had to be admitted to a national public university. My grades weren't bad, but the admission rate to national public universities is very marginal. Especially since I wanted to go to a medical school, my chances were even smaller. I studied like crazy. My only driving force was my childhood dream of becoming a doctor. The dream of becoming a doctor and to be looked up to by everyone kept me going. And I was admitted. I wasn't at the top of the list, but I made it in. I was finally at the starting point of making my childhood dream come true. My parents were thrilled. Neither my father nor mother went to college, so they were proud of their son getting to a public medical school. They invited our relatives over to celebrate. Although it was a public university, tuition wasn't cheap, but they still had an extravagant celebration anyway. My father didn't express his emotions much. He always kept a straight face. He rarely voiced his opinion or took initiative on anything. My mother took care of everything, and he showed up last and left without saying a word. He was the typical stern and silent Japanese father of the time. That's why I was surprised to see him shedding tears of joy, and I cried along with him. He went around to all my relatives while repeatedly slapping my back, saying how proud and lucky he was to have a son like me. He bragged about my achievements to all who would hear them. The celebration became my farewell party as I was about to leave for Tokyo. My father yelled "Banzai" repeatedly at the station as the train pulled away. I was a little embarrassed, but when I could no longer see my father, I could clearly recall the tears pouring down. The days of hellish studying and exams began after that. Some days I was tempted to just give up and submit myself to the lavish lifestyle of the city. But the letters from my family always encouraged me and gave me the strength to go on. My dream then was to open up my own clinic in my hometown so I could contribute to the region. I never even dreamed of getting involved with brains. One day, I noticed a difference in the letter from my family. The letter said the usual things about how I was at home and asked how I was doing. But the postscript was what caught my attention. Your father has become really violent lately. Sometimes he turns the house upside down, and I don't know what to do. I just couldn't picture him acting viciously. I was extremely surprised. Did something happen? But in the postscript, my mother said that there was nothing she could think of. My mother and father had been together for a long time. They'd been together since well before I was born. So she knows things that I couldn't. She couldn't even think of a reason why my father had become so violent. What happened? They got along so well. They were such a lovely couple. When I caused a problem for my mother when I was little, my father only bonked my head with his knuckle. Was he acting this way towards my mother? Maybe there was some kind of misunderstanding between them. I was going home for the new year. Maybe I could have a good talk with him then. But the situation was a lot more serious than I thought. On one cold winter day, I found my apartment door unlocked. I thought someone had broke in, but I found my mother in my apartment with her luggage. That's right. My mother could no longer take my father's fury and came to stay with me. This was back when people still believed in the proverb, a man has no place to settle down all her life. A woman has no place to settle down all her life. She couldn't go back to her own family because they lived in the same region as my father, so she came all the way to Tokyo. I heard about my father's violence from my mother's own lips. She cried, saying she had no idea why such a quiet man changed like that. She said she wasn't ever going back to him. I didn't know what to do. I asked her if I could talk to him one more time, but the bruises on her body told me it was no use. To remember what happened afterwards is too much, so I'll be brief. After my mother left, my father thought she was having an affair and went over to the neighbor's house with a wooden sword. He was arrested. He was released immediately, but he assumed someone in the neighborhood was hiding her, so he did the same thing repeatedly. He eventually reached the point of getting into fights with anyone he saw. In the end, he picked a fight with some young punks and ended up being beaten to death. My relatives gave my father a decent funeral, but my mother didn't attend. It's no use beating a dead horse. So nobody said anything negative about my father, but everyone was simply puzzled as to why he changed so much. What I heard from my relatives about my father's final days was a lot stranger than what I heard from my mother. My mother only told me about his sudden rage and violence. But my relatives told me he also laughed and grew sad. Apparently, he displayed several sudden fluctuations of emotion, especially so in his last years. They also told me he started to complain about headaches after an accident he had. Brain damage? My father was a construction worker. He had hit his head hard on a construction board during an accident at work. He regained his consciousness quickly and seemed fine. But since the accident, he started to have headaches and behave abnormally. I sensed a connection between the accident and my father's changes, so I talked to my professor after I went back to Tokyo.
断言はできませんが、その様子から入江君のお父さんに何らかの異常が起こっていた可能性は否めません。その事故の際に脳が傷つき、精神的な変化を起こしたのかもしれませんね。お父さんの晩年の言動からは、そんな患者さんに多く見られるいくつかの症状が伺えます。
Human behavior is created by the brain. And if the brain is damaged, it can cause erratic behavior. In other words, my father wasn't crazy. He was suffering from a disorder.
お父さんの遺体を検視できるなら、脳をよく調べてみるといいでしょう。ひょっとすると腫瘍のようなものが見つかるかもしれません。
My father had already been cremated, so there was no way of knowing. But hearing about his behavior, I knew for sure. That was the only way to explain why such a quiet and gentle man would change. I tried to explain all this to my relatives to regain my father's honor, but hardly anyone understood. If his brain was damaged, he would have been dead. But he was alive and well. So the accident didn't damage his brain. It wasn't his brain that caused him to change, it was his mind. And the mind can be influenced by the state of the brain, you dummies. They simply brushed it off like that. This is the perception most people have about the brain. They don't realize the brain and that the mind and the brain are connected. Most of the relatives didn't believe me. But there was one person who I really wanted to anyway. Your mother? That was my mother. As she got older, she grew senile, and she exaggerated the abuse she had to endure. All she did was criticize my father. And every time, she ended up crying, lamenting that she married him. They were a lovely couple. We were a great family. That's why I wanted to convey to her that she was misunderstanding the situation with my father. My father's behavior was caused by his brain damage. What he did to her was very sad, but he didn't want it to be that way. I told her that he wasn't at fault. But my mother didn't understand. Before she took her last breaths, I begged her to forgive my father. But her final words were, "Please don't bury me next to that man." My father wasn't at fault. He was simply the victim of a brain disorder. You don't complain to a person who's coughing because he has a cold. Because coughing is just a symptom, and you should be sympathized with. In my father's case, the symptoms weren't as obvious as a cough. They took the forms of changes in personality, which are much harder to recognize. If I had studied the brain more, I could have explained it better to my mother so that she could have understood him. And they could have been a nice couple again in heaven. When I realized that, I cried. And I also realized there were plenty of people like my father in this world who are suffering from a disorder, yet they are misunderstood and despised for it. And then I found out. I found out about a miraculous cure for such disorders called a lobotomy. Ever since that day, I spent my days learning about the brain, so I could help people who are suffering from mental illnesses. My father is gone. But if he was still alive, I could cure him myself, so he and my mother could reconcile. That's the main reason why I am here. You're making me feel emotions I don't want to feel right now, man. Stop that. Why is everybody so much more deeper than they appear on the surface? I mean, yeah, I guess I am. I mean, I don't want it to sound like as though this is that's a criticism or anything, but it's just like the more I find out about everybody, the more I feel bad for like half of them, you know? And I'm like, God damn it, man. It just makes a lot of events, it just paints a lot of events from the previous chapters in much harsher lights for me, so it just, in turn, ends up making the whole journey, the whole story up till this point, feel a lot more tragic and misunderstood in hindsight, and that's just quite sad to me. I have a feeling that in the next episode I might be able to connect at least one of these broken fragments. In fact, I'll check right now to see if I can. Doesn't look like it. Well, like I said, I probably will be able to connect at least one of them next time. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut things off here. I hope you guys enjoyed this latest episode of Higurashi no Kai Chapter 8. If you did and you want to see more content from me, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I will see you all next time. Take care.